going, Blamers? And welcome to Blame It on Mel. Today's guest grew up Mormon and perfected purity culture. BYU-Idaho, temple marriage at 19, checking every box that she was taught would keep her worthy. The night before her sealing, she cried and begged God to stop the marriage. But in a system where wanting sex meant marriage was the only option, she went through with it. She had 4 kids with a man that she wasn't sexually attracted to, found connections outside her marriage, and eventually left the Mormon church. Let's find out the why, and did her husband and kids follow or stay, and did her marriage survive? Welcome to the show, Heather.
Hey, Mel, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here to tell my story.
Your story is fantastic, and also one that I don't feel like is uncommon, but one that we also don't really talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to so many women who are like, your story is exactly my story. And so I think it just needs to be spoken about for sure.
No, it does. And I think that it can help so many people. I wish that I would have heard your story years ago. It would have been able to help me probably get back, like get on track quicker than I did. It took our marriage too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your background. Where did you grew up in the church? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Provo, Utah, right like on the campus of BYU. And like the Provo Temple was in my backyard. The MTC was right across the street. Um, and so we always grew up with just really in this heavy, dense Mormon culture. I'm the youngest of 4 children, and my parents were, I would say, in some ways, our family was Orthodox in our Mormonism, but in some ways we weren't. When I was really young, my mom went back to school to earn her master's degree and like later became the primary provider for our family. And so I think in that way, I had this other thread that wasn't what I was seeing in most Mormon families, where my mom was the primary earner and really heavily focused on her education and her growth. And so, yeah, in some ways, very Orthodox, in other ways, a little bit different than what a lot of my peers were going through.
So, did your dad work?
My dad did work, yes. I don't know if he ever actually finished his college degree. So he's always working a little more blue collar positions. And that was also really interesting to watch, as he was always like chasing a next like get rich quick kind of idea, which I think that Mormonism primes people for, like this idea that I don't know, that the unbelievable can happen, that like something really remarkable can happen. Not that it doesn't, but I think that it can prime people for this idea of like, I'm meant for something so great and so grand. But for him, that wasn't like always playing out in the action of it. And so my mom was really the steady one that kind of held everything together. My parents, their Bible was the First Strength for Youth pamphlet. And I just remember from such a young age, like I said, I'm the youngest of 4. And so I have 2 older sisters, and watching my parents just like instill in my sisters, we follow this pamphlet, like everything that's in it, the modesty standards, how we speak, how we conduct ourselves. If it's not in there, we don't do it, how we date. It was all laid out in that. Like, that's what I really remember being pushed as a kid.
Okay, so let's go over that. What was in there? As far as modesty, what did it say?
So what's interesting, if you were to look at a For Strength of Youth pamphlet now, it's going to look very different. Now it's like more ideology based. It's like, oh, here's the feeling we're going for. But when we were young, when I was young, it was laid out. It was like, you do not date until you are 16. Modesty, it was very much like girls should have their shoulders covered. You shouldn't be showing too much of your body. In my family, that was interpreted from a young age that anything I wore from the time I was a toddler should be garment appropriate. So meaning anything that I was ever going to wear, I should be able to put garments underneath it.
So you would at least have to wear even like knee length shorts, right? And what about swimsuits?
Always full piece swimsuits, never a bikini. I would have felt mortified to be in a bikini. Like, I didn't even see it. I felt so uncomfortable if anything, like in my midriff was showing. Like I was continually wearing undershirts, don't show any of your midriff, don't show your shoulders. It was very much like keep yourself covered up.
Did you feel as though you had less confidence in your body because of that?
I would say that my confidence in my body was more about its function. I was very athletic and played competitive soccer growing up. And so I had a lot of confidence in my body's functionality and like what it could do for me. But I didn't have confidence in feeling like my body was a tool to like be attractive to other people. I didn't feel that. I felt okay with my body. I think I had good body image. But in my mind, though, especially as I went into my teen years, it was like that good body image. I felt better about myself if I was covered up. Like I felt like my countenance was glowing, like I was being virtuous and being the woman I'm supposed to be, the girl I'm supposed to be when I was like very modestly clothed. And I had a lot of feedback telling me, yes, that is like, right. That's true.
So, did you go to dances?
I did go to dances. That's really funny. I went to dances and I remember there was a kid that I really liked and he had a twin brother and his twin brother's date showed up in like a strapless dress. And I, of course, had like fully modest dresses. We would
So they had
even
sleeves, right? Your
they
dress
had
had sleeves.
sleeves. Yes, sleeves, not like no low cut. It wasn't always easy to find dresses with sleeves. And so even when I found ones that were like tank top straps, we'd get them altered and like put a sleeve on it. And I remember this kid though telling me at the dance, like, thank you so much for dressing modestly. And I felt so good about myself because I was like, yes, like obviously he's noticing. Like it means something that I dressed modestly. And I like probably internalized that he thought it that I was like this virtuous girl, that I was a good match for like his spiritual needs and I was helping him stay pure and safe. I think that's how I internalized it. Honestly, though, it could have just been like, thanks for not making me embarrassed that my mom had to whip out my sister's old shawls and be like, oh, you look cold. Because that's what she did to his brother's date. And I was
No,
like,
nuh-uh.
yeah, she did. She like saved all his sister's like shawls from her dances and was like, you look like you might be cold and put it on her. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, can you even imagine how that girl felt? The girl
Oh,
with the shoulders?
no, I can't. I like that. I would have felt so embarrassed if I was like,
Yeah.
somebody, obviously you're not, don't think my dress is appropriate.
Yeah, because I mean, in a way, she's being shamed, really, like for just showing her shoulders. And just because she's showing her shoulders doesn't mean that she's impure.
Because of the church, I think I pigeonholed myself and like was always trying to balance creative thinking, but also very black and white, rigid thinking, which happens in the church and then creates a lot of judgment of like yourself and others. And I just remember being like very strict, knowing really from a young age, we don't date till we're 16, don't have boyfriends, and being really judgmental of my peers when they did and being like, oh, that's just not the right thing to do. But I definitely internalized that as like, this is what makes God happy. Like, this will make God happy. And I'm doing what's right. And I'm being a good girl if I follow each of these rules with exactness.
And then what about like earrings?
Oh, only one piercing for sure. never,
One set.
never. Yeah, one set. That was it. Our family had the tradition of doing it when you were 8 and like,
I think that is every single Mormon family that basically when you're baptized, right, then you made the choice to get baptized. So now you can now make the choice to get your ears pierced. Did you see other Mormon girls that had more than one?
I'm sure that it was happening with like my peers who weren't Mormon, but admittedly, growing up in Utah, majority of my peers were.
I had, and I still do, I have 3 in both sides. And then I had one on top in the cartilage. And when I joined the church at 19, they told me, well, now you're going to have to take all of those out except for the one set. And I remember being like, well, I don't feel like you guys told me all these rules up front. Like now that I'm baptized, now it's like you can't wear your cross anymore. You got to take out all those earrings. I had my belly button was pierced. I had to take that out.
And you did? You took them out?
Yeah. I don't say I'm going to do something and not do it. Yeah, that's just my personality. Like if I'm going to say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 100%. Like I'm going to do this Mormon thing. I'm going to freaking kill it.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it perfectly. And then you can't. Nobody does. I think there's a term for it called scrupulosity. It's like OCD around religious rituals and practices and thinking that like your worthiness before God and having to always maintain this state of worthiness. I very much had that in my youth, like thinking that every little thing I did was an affront to God, praying constantly for forgiveness. I think that by nature, I'm like a very sexual being. And so then I realized, like, as a teenager, like I would masturbate and then have to go tell a bishop. And so even though like I was like trying so hard to be perfect, like I would look at the general authorities at the prophet and be like, these people are perfect. I need to be perfect like them so I can be like them one day. And every time I do something like gossip or masturbate or whatever it was, whatever sin, whether it was overt or covert, I would feel like just so much shame and guilt and like go tell my bishop and pray about it and really just feel so badly about myself as I like so debased, like I am not worthy.
You
Such a
were
straight
pretty
out
dang
hit.
close to being perfect already. And then you have this purity culture that is really coming down on you. And you're looking at it like you want to be up there with this Mormon royalty. Cause that's always what I call it. It's like Mormon royalty. They're the ones at the top, right? Like you want to be in that pipeline. You want to be funneled into there. And perfectionism is not real. It is not real. And the stress that is put on, especially these young kids, and the amount of guilt and depression that is tied to that. So imagine the guilt that you felt and you were pretty dang close to being perfect. Imagine somebody that actually really did have sex with their boyfriend, for instance, and had done that. Can you imagine the amount of grief that would have felt like?
As a child, my parents, they really wanted us to do the gospel thing, but they weren't always doing it. Like I remember from age 8, I was the one calling my family to prayer. I was the one asking for family home evening and scripture study. I was planning family home evenings from the age of 8. And so I don't know that everybody internalized like, and it's certainly my siblings did it, like internalized Mormonism the way I did. But for me, something in my psyche like really grasped onto it and was like, this is the truth. This is the light. This is the way. And we have to do all these things if we want to have like a perfect life, if we want to make God happy. And so yeah, certainly I think that if anybody was at the level I was at and then you mess up, oh my gosh, I can't imagine feeling like you could recover from that. I loved you had Ashley B therapy on, and she said that purity culture is child abuse. And that was the first time I'd ever considered that. And I think looking at the way that I treated myself internally because of the purity culture and this like necessity to be right before God, yeah, I think it was like pretty abusive.
Because essentially you're abusing yourself, really. Like you're basically being taught these are the standards and you couldn't live up to them. I mean, but you were. I mean, you were pretty dang close. But yeah, and then you're basically abusing yourself, but that's coming from a church system that's teaching those principles. So yeah, I agree with her. It is a form of child abuse.
And then when I mess up, I have to like go confess to some man, like tell this other person. It's like another whole layer of trauma infliction of like, oh, it's not good enough for me to feel this much guilt for myself. I need to go admit it to another person. And then they have the say on whether I'm good enough or not. And like if it's clean or if it isn't.
And if you can take the sacrament or not, if you get
Yes.
to experience that public shame as well, because everybody will see you if you don't take the sacrament. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of pressure that a lot of kids have where, like, I mean, I can't tell you how many people didn't go and tell the bishop when things happened because they didn't want to have to experience that public shame. I just can't imagine I mean, that is how you were programmed. Essentially, you are programmed from a very young age. And that's why you had those thoughts and these judgments towards all of these other people, and then also judgments towards your own self. It's just the amount of mental abuse, too, is just really extreme.
Well, and it's like, I think socially detrimental because I was in so much judgment of people all the time. It was like hard for me to have authentic connection with peers because I was always judging them of whether they were good enough, of whether they were
Yeah.
righteous enough and doing what was right. It was always so conflicting and confusing, I think, trying to be the authentic me who really just loved everybody that I knew and wanted to see the best in people.
Well, also, purity culture creates judgmental people. It just does. And I mean, I've never been in a single ward where we do not have members policing each other. When, you know, I cannot tell you how many times that I got turned into the bishop for doing things like letting my kids play sports on Sundays or whatever it may be. And I remember even my husband when he was in the bishopric and the bishop found out that somebody was doing something. I think the guy was smoking or something. He was vaping. And my husband knew it. And he had said, oh yeah, and he's like, how did you not tell me? Like he was really upset. The bishop was upset at my husband for not telling him that he knew that somebody in the ward was vaping. And my husband was like, because that's not how repentance works. You can't force somebody to repent. And also, like, he wasn't judging him for doing that. Like people have different struggles. That's for them. That's between them and the Lord, not between us as men to have to force somebody into repentance. But there is so much policing that goes on within the church that I mean, you are you are programmed to be a very judgmental person because you are supposed to tell on each other. And you went to a church school too. I mean, they basically tell you that you're responsible if you know something that is going on within your roommates or friend group, or you see something that is going wrong. And if you don't report it, you're the one that you're also sinning. That's a sin for you because you're not telling on their sin.
I hated the parable of the prodigal son. It was the most annoying thing to me because I was like, no, like F you. I am sitting here doing A through Z, all of it. And how dare you get to go out and like I'm like suffering also. I'm like sitting here suffering because I'm like not being honest with any of my desires or wants or passions or experiences. Meanwhile, you get to go out there and do that and live yourself and experience things, and then you just get to come back and God's just going to forgive you. Like I hated that parable so much because I was just like, that's so unjust. Like I'm doing it all right. And where is my reward? And so then you just become a little narc on everybody because you're like, no, like you don't get it. Like if I don't get to go out there and have fun, you shouldn't be able to either. How dare you?
Ah, I got kicked out of BYU Idaho because my roommates, they told on me for breaking curfew. Because I was 21 years old, by the way, 21 years old, and I had a curfew. And I
Yeah,
can't
that's
remember what
insane.
it was, but it was pretty strict. Do you remember what it was at BYU Idaho? I want to say it was like midnight on the weekends.
Yeah, I think it was probably around midnight.
Okay, let's be clear. My 15-year-old son, he has a 12 o'clock curfew, and he negotiates it to 12:30 every single weekend. And I'm 21 years old.
The rules and the policing, it really can get so out of hand.
No, it really can. It's really tough when you already have so many of these rules, and we kind of touched on some of them, but then to put those on top of the already very strict rules is really it's difficult, and it's difficult for anybody to follow the amount of impractical rules that just really, like, who gives a shit?
Right. And I think that's where sometimes it's hard when you hear people saying, oh, that's like culture, not doctrine or whatever. And you're like, no, there was like a prophet literally said, you should only have one piercing. A prophet literally said those things. And there are things they printed out the For Strength for Youth pamphlet that said, do not date till you're 16. Do not go on steady dates. Here's what you should wear. Here's what you should watch. Like it was laid out explicitly. The rules were laid out very explicitly for us. It
And so
wasn't
were you under the impression that the For Strength of Youth, that was doctrine basically? Because anything,
absolutely.
right? Because anything that is put out by a prophet, even what is talked about in general conference,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
That
Right.
all, I remember being taught that was all doctrine.
Yes. Yeah, you should take it as if God said it. Like if it is printed by the church, if it's said by
Yeah.
somebody over a pulpit at general conference, you should
But
take.
but you see a lot of people now, a lot of members, they're like, no, 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 that's the culture. And I'm like, no, that was never the culture. That was the doctrine.
And we were taught to believe that if a prophet said it, like a prophet would never be infallible. A prophet would never say anything that's not what God wants them to say. In fact, he would strike them down and kill them if they said that. So then you would go back from like current all the way through all of those prophets, anything they said was gospel. It was like what was supposed to be until I guess somebody changed their mind and did it differently.
So you're in high school, you managed to make it through all of high school without slipping up, without drinking alcohol.
No, no alcohol, no substances. I had one boyfriend, but even then, I wrote him like a 3-page dossier that was like, we will not be holding hands. We will not, like, we won't hold hands in public. We're not going to kiss. Like, and it was probably so packed with like religious sentiment. Like, I'm a daughter of God. Like, my virtue matters. I think it was like it was so intense. And I sat down with him and he's reading it. And by the end, this poor kid is crying. I will not have it be getting back to my parents that I have a boyfriend because my parents were very strict on, I wasn't even allowed to go on 2 dates in a row with a guy. So when I was dating a guy, he would have to have a friend come to the door to get me every other time we went out because I wasn't even allowed to go on 2 dates in a row with the same person. Why? Well, first, like I want to be able to please God, but also my biggest goal in Mormonism was to be going to the temple. I was sung songs about it from the time I was an infant that I'm going to go to the temple and I'm going to get sealed to somebody.
I just can't even imagine how heavy everything felt for you as a kid.
I was like the Beehive class president. I was the Maya Maids class president. I was the Laurel class president, of course, right? I'm on the pipelines. Like I was like
You're going to
the
become
best.
Mormon royalty. You're
Yes.
there. You're there.
Yes. And because of that, I'm like needing to attract guys that are also on the pipeline, And so that was like an extra stressor.
No, it's
And
the rod, right? You got to hold to that iron rod. It's not
yeah.
a pipeline.
But like the real like mess up was internally, I never felt worthy for the guys who I had on this pedestal, like good Mormon guys. I still felt like I just suck. I'm just such a bad
Mm.
little gossipy whore holding people's hands. Like, I just felt so badly about myself. And I just felt so like the weight of all of it. Like, okay, I'm trying so hard to be a good person and then feeling like I'm messing up all the time. And just like my confidence in myself was just like plummeting because I just so bad wanted to be a good girl, but felt like all the time I was falling short.
And you weren't. Like looking back, you're like, you were so good.
Yeah, I was. So if you were to ask any of my peers, they'd be like, Heather was such a freaking prude. Like I did everything. I went to seminary.
Because you were earning your way to heaven. You had that checklist, and the more service that you do, the more blessings that you will have, and you're going to be rewarded with all of the amazing things, and you are going to be in the celestial kingdom if you do all these things.
And that's what I was living for, right? I wanted to show how amazing I was here on earth so that I could also be in that celestial kingdom. I graduated high school and then I turned 18 a couple days later. And then I was scheduled to go to BYU-Idaho and start college just 2 days after that. I think I had a whole week between high school and starting college. And in that time period, I also got my first kiss and I just
Wait, so
cried.
did you ever date the boy that you gave him the letter?
Yes, I did. I did date him. And I think this was also one of those like strange things is it's like there's kind of like these different milestones in Mormonism. It's like, oh, all of a sudden when you're 16, now it's like now date. And that was the Utah culture is very heavy on dating. I mean, I was going on dates every weekend in high school. That was just the culture. Kids went
As a
out and
group
went on
date,
dates.
right? Like
Group
you
dates,
weren't,
yeah.
yeah, you're not
Very
allowed to,
rarely.
yeah, you're not really allowed to kind of pair off until
Yes,
you're
and
18.
exactly.
Okay,
And
that's what I
especially in my
remember.
household.
That's what I remember the rule was, is that you couldn't pair off until you're 18. 16 is group dates, and you're not supposed to go out with the same, like your dad had said, you cannot go out with the same boy more than, one time. And yeah, and then when you're 18, then you're allowed to finally pair off, because that is the point that you are able to be looking to get married, basically. That is so young. And that's what you're told, is that, okay, 18 is when you're able to get married. And you're like, who freaking tells these kids that they can get married at 18?
Well, right. And then to that point is that I've only been socializing with my male peers for 2 years, really, because the church is like very segregated. So, like, when I was a child at 8, the boys went to Boy Scouts and we went to achievement days. It was segregated. I was not interacting with my male peers. In fact, I was taught very much that I was a danger to my male peers, that like my goal in high school was to make sure all my male peers made it to their missions, that I was not, my friend gave me this word today, I was not a stumbling block to anybody. It was exactly, I was not to be a stumbling block to any of my male peers. Their goal was to go on missions, and my goal was to help them do that.
I
So,
mean, how do you feel about that now?
well, now I feel like so sad and so grateful that my children are not going to be serving missions. And I think it's so sad they at 18 need to go out and do that. But I obviously don't feel it's my responsibility to be making sure that anybody else is morally safe. Like, it's not my responsibility to do that.
But it also just added to the heaviness that you already had. You have this extreme pressure on you to have this level of perfectionism that is unachievable. And now, not only are you putting the pressures on yourself to be perfect, but now you are also trying to make sure that these boys are also, they're living up to the gospel. They're following all of the rules, and that they're going to be able to get on a mission. Like, that is so heavy that you're already beating yourself up about yourself, and then also taking on the responsibility of other people.
Well, and then I think that feeds into like a greater endemic within the LDS culture of women mothering the males around them and like being in this caretaker role, because we're actually taught from a really young age to be in that role. And then in some ways it infantilizes the men and is like, the women are going to take care of you. And it's their job to like make sure that you are like spiritually safe and well, and to be thinking about you and your needs. And so
Well, the other thing too is that it is basically programming these women to then later, when things go wrong in their marriage, because they feel as though they're responsible for the sins of these boys. So if they have impure thoughts, well, obviously it's because of something that the girl did. She was, being too seductive, or she wasn't dressed properly, or whatever that is. And so then later on in your marriage, if your husband sins or he does something wrong, then it is, and I've spoken to a lot of women that have said the bishops have put it back on them, that it was their responsibility. It was something that they did wrong, or even that they internalized it themselves, because that's what they were programmed their entire life, is that they were responsible for these boys, and now they're responsible for their husbands.
the LDS Church doesn't really teach individualization because you're actually really taught that partnership is the highest thing. And so you are responsible to your partner for your eternal salvation. Not only for like whatever sins they do here, but for your eternal salvation, you have to be responsible to this partner. And you're taught that from a very young age. And so it's not so much about the individual, it's about like you have to be focusing on someone else, which I think that we need that in our society. I think we need to be thinking about other people, but I think we really need to think about ourselves too and focus on our own well-being. And, I think that if two whole people come together, that makes a more happier union than people thinking now we're going to complete each other in some way. But then all of a sudden I turn 18 and I go to college a week after high school. So like 1 week I'm a high school student. The next week I'm an 18-year-old woman who's now, it's like very known, if you go to a church school, your job is to get married. Like that is your job. And in some ways I didn't feel that in some ways because I had my mom as an example. And my parents just really pushed education and career on us. I really was chasing that. I really wanted to have a successful career, and I really wanted to feel secure and safe because um, we grew up like poorer with less money. But I equated that to safety. Like if I was an earner, then I would be safe. If I could earn a steady income, that would be safety to me.
So
And
back up, because so basically your
yeah,
mom didn't really work when before the children, her kids were in school.
no, she didn't work. She raised us. And then when I was 5, then she went back to school at BYU.
So that's not really that unorthodox, because that, I do feel like that does happen where like, your mom still felt the pressure to have to stay at home and raise the kids until she got you guys all into school, and then later she was able to go back to school.
Yeah, I would say it's not that unorthodox now. I feel like in the 90s, it wasn't as seen in the LDS culture. I didn't see as many of my friends' moms having careers, um, even when their kids were in school. Like maybe they did something from home, or they were the secretary for the seminary, or they worked in some way like adjunct to church. But I didn't see them like actually being a career earner very often. Like it was more seen as like a part-time jobs or side jobs that the moms did. At least that's what I like saw growing up. It could have been different in other areas,
It was
but
probably yeah, completely different, especially in Provo, I would guess.
when I went to college, I think I was able to like leave behind this like old persona of who I was and just be a more relaxed version of me. From the week my mom dropped me off to college, I was going on dates. I continued what I was doing in high school. I was going on at least one date a week, if not more. And I was watching these older girls, older women. Oh my gosh, they were 21. But I was watching these older women and they weren't dating as much. But in my head, I was like, oh, the guys don't want them. They're too old. And that kind of like started a time clock for me of like, I better find somebody before I'm 20. So I was 18, dropped off at college, and my first date in college was with a guy who was 28 years old. And I
28?
28, I
So
didn't
that's
know
10
his,
years older than you?
I know, right. I didn't know his age before we went on the date.
Also, how
Um,
is he existing at BYU Idaho at 28 years old and not married? There is definitely something wrong with him.
why are you dating an 18-year-old? What do we have in common? Nothing. But he had a motorcycle, and I was kind of like in this new era of Heather, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just be a little like let loose just a
Oh yeah, you're
little.
just going to throw yourself right into this dating thing. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so I went on a couple dates with this guy, and on the third date, I was like hugging him, and he reached his hand down and like grabbed my butt, and I pulled back and smacked him, first of all. And I'm like, I'm ready to go home. It felt like such a violation for me because I'm like, I'm a little girl. Like, I literally am still wearing like little girl underwear. Like, I'm like 18. I am like, I'm not ready for this. Like, I'm not ready for this. And so then I started dating another kid who was my age. My first year of college, there was a bunch of 18-year-old boys at BYU, Idaho, because they had a whole year before their missions.
Yeah, what were they
And
called again? They had a label.
preemies. Yeah,
Preemies.
preemies.
Yeah, they were
Mhm.
preemies.
And so I was just dating the younger guys, and I um, had a boyfriend, and we became very close. He was like my first love, like the first guy I made out with. And like we just had like through the roof, like great chemistry together.
Well, probably because he
And
was closer to your age.
yeah, right. Well, and I think I had like just let loose, and it was like my first time feeling like I loved somebody, and I felt just really safe being like as like physical with him as I wanted to be. Cause I think that in high school I probably wanted to be physical with guys. I just felt so much like fear of doing anything like that. And
So why do you think that you were able to let go of that fear at this point?
I felt just more in control of my choices. And so I really did trust myself. I felt like I was going to make good choices for myself, but I didn't have to be so rigid and like outlined in all of these rules. And also, I just like making out. And so I was like, well, I like how this feels. So this is great.
And there's nothing
Um,
wrong with it.
no, there's nothing wrong with it.
Did you walk
And
away with any sort of shame?
no, not initially. I didn't. But as like our relationship progressed, we had been dating for several months, and we would like get more progressively like hot and heavy, and start touching each other's butts or like reaching up each other's shirts. Like we were definitely crossing boundaries. Like I definitely was doing things that were not in the honor code, laying down, making out, and then I started to feel guilty. Like then the guilt started to set in. And at that point, I was like, I'm not going to talk to bishops anymore about this. It was like also weird because I'm a pretty smart person and like academically. And I was like, this is like biologically a very normal thing for a teenage girl and a teenage boy to be like into each other and wanting to be physical with each other. It was a very normal thing. And so there was like part of me that was like, this is very normal. And yet I knew because the language in the church is you're not supposed to like excite the feelings you would have in marriage. So you're like not, you can like make out and that's fine. But if you like start feeling like, I don't know, horny, like excited, like I want to go further with this, you've crossed the line at that point.
Well, you're supposed to then cut that relationship off.
Right. And pray and like go talk to your bishop and repent. and um And so I think it got to a point though with this kid where I was like, you know what? I think I probably would just have sex with him. But I like my body was saying that. But in my mind, I knew that if we were to cross that line, we would just end up hating each other because, first of all, we'd both be kicked out of school. He wouldn't get to go on a mission. I could potentially like end up pregnant or something because I had no knowledge of like safe sex
Right. Because the church teaches abstinence, right? And I'm sure that you were not allowed to go to any sort of sex ed classes either and I'm guessing sex ed classes were different in Provo than they were the rest of the world. But I know that my husband, his mom would not let him go to any of the sex ed classes. So he, like he would basically like alter the permission slip that you had to have signed and he would just alter it because he was like, I don't want to be like the one person that gets like because he's from California. So he's like, I don't want to be booted out of the class. And also it's interesting and you should be able to learn about safe sex and exploring your bodies and all of those things. And that is not okay in the Mormon church.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I went to sex ed, but I think that in Utah, I remember abstinence being pushed as like the best way. Like you don't want to get STDs, you don't want to get pregnant, abstinence is the key.
You're not even taught about birth control or condoms or safe sex in any way.
One time he and we were like the only ones in his apartment, which is also a no-no. You're not supposed to like be the only ones in the apartment. And we're like making out and things are getting really primal.
Are
And
you in his bedroom?
no, we're just like in the living room.
Oh, so at least you're following that because you're not even supposed to cross the threshold, right, of the living room,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
you were following the
We're
rules.
following some rules. But all of a sudden, all his roommates come in, and he had a bunch of like most of his roommates were returned missionaries. And that, like, having your boyfriend on top of you, and he's like excited and it's like obvious. And there's just, it was
But you're not
very
having sex,
embarrassing.
like, really, honestly, you're making out.
Yeah.
He's probably touching your boobs. It's like,
Yes.
you know what I mean? You're dry humping. Really, that's what's happening, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And yeah, so like that was really embarrassing. And I remember the next day I came over and like his older roommate sat us down and they were like, um, had like this older brother talk with us and they didn't turn us in or anything. I think they really were like, oh man, these kids are going to cross a line. We better save them before they do.
Well, also
And
probably because most of them have been there.
yeah, probably. But like something really fractured in that relationship though, in that because it was just so tainted with like shame and guilt and like his only goal was to go on a mission. That's like all I should care about is him going on a mission and not being a stumbling block to him going on a mission.
And
And
also remember, you are responsible for him going on a mission, and you will
yes,
be held responsible for keeping him off a mission. That's your
well,
responsibility.
right. And I'm responsible to myself too to go be worthy to go to the temple. And if I did that with him, I'm not worthy to go to the temple then. And so it was this whole chain of everything. So we ended up going home to our respective homes during our off semester, and he broke up with me. I had a plane ticket to fly out to see him, and he was like, "I think you better not come." The night before, he said, "I don't think you should come," and that was like really hard because he was turning 19 and he was turning in his papers, and it was like he was really focused and his parents were really focused on him going on his mission, and I was just this distraction. And so I was heartbroken, and my uncle and aunt invited me down to their house in California for a couple weeks. And that was the first time that I really went on dates with returned missionaries. Because the 28-year-old, he wasn't a mission, like returned missionary. He was like a convert to the church. And I don't think he understood everything quite the church way. So I think that with my previous boyfriend, there was this air of like, I need to be, after everything happened with him, I was like, I need to be dating. I need to get more serious. I need to be dating somebody who can take me to the temple, who's going to put me back on like this Mormon general authority, like line here, who's going to be in step with me of like, who am I really as like a worthy daughter of God? And so this guy like fit the bill because he was like so churchy. And the first time he came to visit me, in Utah. He drove up from California to visit me. And he sat down my entire family and busted out his guitar and sang the entire RM soundtrack. I don't know if you're familiar with the RM, but it was a
Yeah.
movie. Okay, it's a movie about this
Yeah.
guy who like comes home from his mission and he just wants to be back on his mission because he like missed the spiritual high of it. And like that was this kid. And that was like, I was like feeling like, okay, I'm doing what's right. Like this is what's right. I found like a good guy. And
He plays the guitar. It's
yeah,
perfect.
plays guitar. He's like and anyway, so after like we've been dating for several months and he'd come up to see me again in Utah, I went in to like kiss him after one date and he like freaked out. And was that not okay? Like he seemed really offended that I tried to just even kiss him, like a peck on the lips. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't want somebody that's like that heavy indoctrinated that they can't even be physical with me. I kind of started to reason with myself, like, what am I actually even looking for in a partner?
At 18, when your brain's not developed, you're making these decisions.
At 18, it's less about what am I wanting for myself and it's more
Mhm.
about like finding a partner. All of a sudden, it was like I went into college really focused on my career, and very quickly it became flipped that I was focused on marriage and finding a partner and being a partner. Like that's so wild. And at 18. And so we
It's
break
not
up and
really
I'm
that wild because you have these weekly devotionals at BYU Idaho, and every single devotional is telling you that you need to get married. You need to not worry about the right time. There's never going to be a right time. They tell you that, education can happen later, that you are selfish. You need to get married and not worry about being in the right financial state, even. I remember that even being something that was taught, but you are basically brainwashed over and over and over put into these huge auditoriums that everybody was like, it was mandatory for every single one of us to go to these devotionals in these huge auditoriums where you have the president of BYU-Idaho, and usually his wife is speaking, and they would always have these different speakers, but it was every single week that you are being programmed that is your goal. You need to get married, and you need to get married as soon as possible. Your education is secondary. Your even work, money, secondary. Everything is secondary.
That's so true. And so when I, like, my first semester at college was like kind of fun, and I was able to date kids who were my peers. But by the time I came back for my third semester of college, the script had completely flipped. It was like, now I didn't want to date 18-year-olds anymore, because that was so painful to like send somebody on a mission and have to separate from somebody who I like really loved and genuinely cared about and wished I could have like continued a relationship with.
But at the same time, you're still freshly out of high school. You're still 18. Like, for you to even have things that are in common with somebody that is 21 to 23 years old is not really realistic either.
Right. Well, and they have come off their missions with explicit instructions from their mission presidents to go find a wife. That is
Yes.
their job, to go find a wife. And what am
Yes.
I? 18? Dude, I'm fresh meat. And at the same time, like I said, I feel like I've always lived in this juggling of like hearing Heather and wanting to do what Heather needs and wants in life, but also really, really wanting to please God. And like you usually almost always putting that before my own desires. And so my patriarchal blessing told me that I will, with my mouth, form words that will bring people to Christ. And I interpreted that to mean I was going to get a job in speech therapy. I had done a lot with special needs kids growing up, and I was like, hey, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a speech therapist. And
No, you're
BYU,
doing it right now. You are doing it right now.
I'm bringing people to Christ. Like, here we go.
You are. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, the real meaning of Christ. Like, I don't believe that any of those things that we're taught, I don't believe that those things are Christ-like. I don't believe that judging people and having this false sense of perfectionism and seeing all of these members that are completely just depressed and miserable and having really terrible lives because they were impacted so heavily by a system. I just don't believe that is Christ-like. I don't believe that's coming to Christ at all.
So, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think I feel more
I
Christ-like
I
now than I did.
I agree with you. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I have so much more love for everybody
Hmm.
than I did before.
The perfectionism, the elitism that I felt growing up in Provo, and then I went to high school in Salt Lake Valley, but in Utah in general, it just wasn't as present at BYU-Idaho, and I really loved it. But I knew that in order to be a speech therapist, I had been working as an aide to a speech therapist while I was at BYU-Idaho. But in order to do that, I needed to have a master's degree. And so I applied to BYU Provo to transfer to do their bachelor's to master's program for speech pathology. And so I also had this other timeline now where as soon as that year at BYU-Idaho was done, I was going to be transferring to BYU Provo. And so dating was also different then, because I was like, I'm leaving. I'm going to follow my career. I'm going to follow my school. And so dating guys was also different because it didn't have as much of a state of permanence. And still, I'm like 19 now, barely 19, and realizing, oh no, I have this time clock here of like a year to get married before I become unwanted baggage of like Mormon maiden. And I didn't want that. And so I was dating, I started dating a guy who I felt was really great. I feel lucky in all my relationships. Any of these men I'm talking about and boys I'm talking about, they're really great people. And I feel lucky that I've had that as my experience. But he was really well educated. He was actually the guitar player of my first boyfriend's band. So that was also really interesting because I was 18 and I felt so immature compared to the older guys, all these RMs in this band. And I was always like fawning over my boyfriend, where I was like, if he was like, let's take this to the bedroom, I was going to go. I was like, so desiring sex, like that physical intimacy with the guys I was dating. I was just wanting that so much as like an additional expression of myself, as an expression of like how we felt about each other, as like an ends to a mean for my body and all its hormones. Like I really was like, oh my gosh, I just want to like have sex. And I broke it off with him also kind of because of that, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's dangerous. If I'm literally sitting here saying, if he were to say, let's go to the bedroom, I would say yes. Heather, like what depravity have you shrunken into that you'd be willing to do that? And so I was like, I better break it off. You're not safe. And so when I met my husband, um, he was fine. I enjoyed his company, but I wasn't, and we were good friends, but there wasn't that same passion that there was with these other guys that I had been dating. And
That
right
you're
before
talking
I,
about that sexual passion.
yeah, yes, I would say that. And even like a lot of like mental and emotional stimulation. Like it was just more like easygoing, like very level, like very level. And in some ways there that is served me well. And I think I was like navigating my own safety. And that's why I leaned towards that. And so when he told me that he loved me, I was like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. I don't feel that same way. And I broke things off with him. But we found our way back to each other. We started dating again, my husband and I. President Hinckley had said, like, any two good people can make it work. And I was like, well, he is a great guy. My husband's an amazing human and always made me feel very treasured and loved and desired. And I was like, well, we're two good people. We can make it work.
Well, did you ever make any sort of connection to is like when you had that sexual chemistry with these other guys that you just maybe thought that, oh, it was because they were bad guys. Like so they were maybe, a little bit more
But a little bit
wild.
edgy. Yeah, like it was a little bit edgy. They were risk takers. I think that innately I am a risk taker, but I would like suppress that because I was like, only do what's right, only do what's safe. And so they brought in this part of me that was a little bit more wild.
Essentially, this is only a solid year of you dating. You've only been dating for a year.
Yeah.
And
But
you
I'm
were
like,
supposed to find somebody that you were going to spend the rest of your life with in a year of just even figuring out how to date.
because Kyle had started talking about marriage. He wanted to get married, and I was like, I don't want to. I'm so immature. I'm so young. He's like, well, if you're going to age anyway, and if I'm willing to be around while you like do it, then why not? And I'm like, okay. Like every time I'd have like I don't want this, he would like retort with something else. And I mean, I don't see it as being manipulative. I see it as he really loved me and he really did want to be with me. And he thought that was the right thing to do. Like we're Mormon, we're supposed to get married. Like in his mind, this is like the right thing to do.
And
And so
how long had you been dating him?
let's see, we started dating in July, like going on dates in July. We became more serious around September. And so then around December is when he was like, I want you to come meet my family in Pennsylvania. Let's go look at wedding rings. And I kind of been like consigned to, okay, I'll marry him.
So 3
So
months.
3 months, yeah. And I just remember praying to God, like, if there's anybody out there who can love me, like if it's possible that maybe there's anybody beside Kyle, like give me a sign while I'm hanging out with this guy. Like give me a sign that like he's into me or that somebody else like flirts with me or something. And nothing happened. And so I took it as God's sign of like, no, you're supposed to marry Kyle. When I went and prayed and asked God if I should marry Kyle, the answer I got, which now I interpret as like my own voice was just make a choice, and whatever choice you're going to make is going to be okay.
Even in the middle of like praying, like we keep thinking about this, like you are literally for every single thing that is going on in your life, you are praying, like you are
Oh,
seeking
everything.
answers from God. Like, did you ever think that like even just like trusting in yourself, like instead of using like, because I feel like prayer kind of takes away the logic and
Yeah.
thinking for yourself.
Hmm.
And so like, did it ever cross your mind like, hey, you know what? Maybe I could date for a little bit longer. Like even like maybe I don't feel that right now with this person. Maybe I'll feel it later on. Like, did it ever cross your mind that you didn't have to get married
No.
right now? It was basically like, okay, I either have to break up with this person or I have to marry him. It was never
Yes.
the third option of, hey, maybe we could date for a while. That was
No.
never ever an option.
Well, that's no, never. Never an option in any of my relationships. It always felt like you have to, if it wasn't leading towards marriage quickly, I got to get out because I need to get married. And I need to get married not only because am I getting older? I'm 19. I
Barely.
also like
You're
want to have
barely
sex.
19. If you now could go back and talk to you then, what would you say?
I think what I would say though to me is try to be like, just chill out a little bit. Like, just take the stick out of your butt. Like, calm down a little bit and enjoy yourself. And like, just enjoy yourself. Because I very often would lean away from fun because I wanted to stay so close to like the iron rod, like so close to what God wanted me to do or what I was interpreting that God wanted me to do the night before our marriage. So we got engaged in December at the Washington, D.C. temple. Of course, like I wouldn't want to have been proposed to anywhere else than at temple. And then we get married in May in the Bountiful, Utah temple. But the night before our wedding, I just wanted out. I just wanted out. I did not want to get married. But I felt like I had hopped in the train and it was already going and there was no stopping it. And so the night before our wedding, I just prayed to God. I said, please, like, if there's anything you can do to stop this, please stop it. Like, I don't want to get married tomorrow. Just like bawling my eyes out. I fell asleep the night before my wedding crying, just so distraught, wishing that I could just not do this.
And this is supposed to be like one of the happiest times of your life. Do you feel like it was just him or was it that you didn't really want to get married?
I think it was both. I think I didn't want to get married. I was actually having a lot of fun dating,
Yeah.
experimenting,
Well, and you
seeing
didn't
what
get to
was
do
out
it for
there.
very long. You didn't.
Yeah. And I didn't. And then but see, once again, I blamed myself. I was like, oh, if you weren't like so like overly sexual, maybe you could have. But no, like you can't help but get physical with a guy. Like if I'm dating a guy, I can't help like jump on him. And so then what do? Got to get married.
Yeah, you just wanted to fuck.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, blamers. So this is where we pause Heather's story. 19 years old, 1 year in the dating pool, hormones firing like a 4th of July finale. Terrified she was going to ruin her eternal salvation because, plot twist, she was a horny teenager. In a system where wanting sex is a sin, but getting married fixes everything, Heather did what she was programmed to do. She married the first guy who asked. Not her soulmate, not her dream man, just willing. And he was temple worthy. Because in part 2, we're talking about what happens after the wedding when the fairy tale shuts the door and reality shows up unannounced. Was her first time everything she was promised or a letdown wrapped in garments and guilt? Buckle up, blamers, because the loophole didn't work and that's when things get real.